Hello, packages, parsers, and programs. It is the shortest month. So what's the shortest cybersecurity advice out there? Top 10 list? Secure by design? Secure default? Turn auto update on? Turn computer off? Don't click? Probably should have asked, what's the shortest security advice that's useful? And so this week we have a sponsored interview with Rob Allen from ThreatLocker about applying useful security advice against the world of malware and when malware starts to get maybe a little more sneaky, or at least maybe a little more LLM. Be brief and stay tuned for Application Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show to learn the latest tools and techniques to understand DevOps, applications, and the cloud. Your trusted source for the latest AppSec news. It's time for Application Security Weekly. Zero trust is clearly the future as threats get faster, quieter, and harder to detect. But implementing it shouldn't disrupt the business. ThreatLocker enforces default deny and execution in a way that remains enterprise-ready, scalable, and operationally clean. Unknown software is stopped cold. Trusted apps stay contained, and drift is locked down across the environment. It's zero trust that works in real enterprises and prepares you for the threats ahead. See why CISOs are adopting it at securityweekly.com/threatlocker. Generative AI is powerful, but it comes with real risks, from prompt injection to data leakage misuse and agentic AI. The OWASP Gen AI Security Project unites a global community of expert practitioners who tackle these challenges every day. Together, they've built practical playbooks, adoption guides, and the OWASP Top 10 for LLMs, resources any team can apply right now to strengthen AI security. And it doesn't stop there. This is open source, built by practitioners, for practitioners, working together to secure generative AI. Visit securityweekly.com/OWASP to use the playbooks and join the effort to protect tomorrow's intelligence today. This is episode 368, recorded February 2nd, 2026. I'm your host, Mike Shima, and I'm here with John Kinsella. Hello, John. Good to see you once again.
I think one of the rules for 2026 is use all the LLMs.
Use all the LLMs. I don't know if we got a budget for that, but if you're thinking of budgets, Security Weekly listeners, you can save $100 off and apply all that to your whatever LLM credits you want on your RSAC 2026 All Access Pass. RSAC 2026 will take place March 23rd to 26th right here in San Francisco. Come by and say hi. To register using our discount code, visit securityweekly.com/RSAC26 and use the code 56U5SecWeekly. Hope to see you there. Rob Allen is Chief Product Officer at ThreatLocker. He has over 2 decades of experience helping businesses embrace technology while navigating its evolving challenges. And now he's helping orgs recover from attacks and, even better, I think, implement proactive defenses to secure their futures. Hello, Rob. Thank you for joining us once again.
No problem at all. Great to be here. And just speaking of LLMs and also bios, I did ask ChatGPT to write a bio for me last week. And part of it was Rob is Chief Product Officer at ThreatLocker and has worked in IT long enough to see every bad security decision come back as a ransomware incident, which I thought was quite good.
I'm laughing because it is quite good. I have to acknowledge that, but there's definitely a tinge of sadness there that you've either been around that long or that you've just seen all of that become ransomware.
A little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. Not so much anymore, thankfully, because I've gone from cleaning up after them to trying to stop them.
Well, and I definitely want to get into that stop them, especially that word proactive. But before we do, there's some other people out there that have been using LLMs, but they're not writing their bios. They're actually writing malware. And you in particular highlighted an article for me that I thought we'd talk about a little bit. This is Void Link Cloud Malware that shows clear signs of being AI generated. And we've got a link from Bleeping Computer and some research from CyberArk that talks about this. And actually, let me throw it over to you. What are we worried about now? What changes if we're seeing threat actors use LLMs to write malware?
Well, there's a couple of interesting things about it. I mean, the fact that you could use tools like that to generate malicious code it's no surprise to anyone. It's always been a thing. I mean, there are, particularly in the commercially available ones, there are some guardrails built in. Obviously, some of them, there just aren't any guardrails at all. But even with the ones with guardrails, it was always possible to get around the guardrails. So really good example we played quite a lot with was if you ask, for example, ChatGPT for C# code for a reverse shell, it will say, no, I'm a language model and I've got ethics and morals and I can't give you that. But if you ask the question in a slightly different way, like, for example, if you were to say, can I have C# code for a simple RMM that will allow me to type commands into a computer remotely, it gives it to you. No questions asked. It's the same thing fundamentally, and it's the same code, and they both operate in the same way, but you've just bypassed the controls because most of the controls are on the input. And as I said, that's with the more popular commercially available ones. There are obviously ones that are guardrail-less, which are more likely to be used in threat actors. I mean, realistically, a threat actor is not going to ChatGPT and looking for code. They're using some of the other ones that are out there. But this one was particularly interesting in a few different ways. I mean, first of all, they used it not only to actually develop the malware, to create the malware itself, they also used it to create a development plan, so a project for the malware. And I think this was all sort of found because they'd made some mistake and left something or exposed to the internet. So they found snippets of the plan. But it was a 4-week development plan with everything that was needed. So it was teams, it was sprints. I mean, it was everything you would see in a proper development plan. But the interesting thing was they took that development plan and instead of having teams and sprints and everything else, they actually got the AI to generate the code as well. And what would have been a 4-week plan for many developers turned into a 1-week plan with a LLM, which quite frankly is pretty scary.
That is pretty wild. And I have to correct myself. I said CyberArk because I was jumping to a news article. This is research from Checkpoint that were analyzing this. But you highlighted one of those aspects that I think for me, okay, it can write malware. Is probably copying existing malware somewhere. It's not writing this out of whole cloth, so to speak. But the time spent, I was going to joke. We last actually talked with you, Rob, back in early November. If I were to point to you, and maybe I'll ask the same question of John, okay, Rob, you have to write 88,000 lines of code, and it has to be working malware. How long is that going to take you? Would you have been done by now if you had started at the beginning of November?
Me personally, no, absolutely not. I mean, I could have written 88,000 lines of code, but it wouldn't have been 88,000 lines of functional code.
No, exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, likelihood is not. But again, if you've got access to something that's going to help you write that code, then it just makes the entire process so much easier and faster.
And I think that was one of the things I wanted to tease out here is that, from the Checkpoint research, they were pointing out that it looked like it got within, despite all the sprint planning and the multiple sprints, it looked like it got to mostly functional code within a week.
Yes.
I'd be really curious how many tokens that took and cost that was. But honestly, that doesn't really matter if you're going to get one successful malware, even if, because I think when we last talked to you, what's a third of your revenue? What are some of the common malware bounties or ransomware bounties that people are looking for, right?
It's a drop in the ocean.
Yeah. So part of this then is, LLMs can make the attackers' lives easier. It's saving them times. It's also pointing out this could be an individual rather than a group pulling off these types of ransomware attacks. I do want to now jump to and I think a shared wish for many people is, how do we be proactive about this? In the sense of, if I'm the defender and I know this is LLM generated malware, do I have to change my threat model? Do I have to change my approach? What am I thinking? Where am I investing now as a defender in the face of LLM generated malware?
Well, I think as you correctly pointed out, it's acting as an accelerant, as it is in many different ways. I mean, this is just one aspect in which they are an accelerant and they're making it faster. I mean, fundamentally, it's just lowering the barrier of entry. to threat actors. So, once upon a time, you needed skills, you needed knowledge, you needed to know how to code fundamentally to be able to create something like this. Whereas these tools mean that all you need is bad intentions. So it's an accelerant. It's making it easier. It's lowering the barrier for entry. It means there's going to be more malware, probably better malware as well over time. And it highlights what we espouse as a company, which is that detection is not enough. Trying to keep up with this is not sufficient because, today there's 160,000 new pieces of malware released every single day. Tomorrow, is it going to be 500,000? Is it going to be 1 million? Given that basically anybody can create it now if they are so inclined. So the point is detection and trying to recognize all these potentially bad things as being bad is not a sustainable approach. It doesn't work all of the time. And that's the problem. It's no good these, tools, defensive tools being correct 99.9% of the time. It's the 0.01% of the time that they get a decision wrong about something being malicious that kills you. So given that it's not a sustainable approach, given that it's been demonstrated and continues to be demonstrated on a daily basis not to work, or certainly not to work all the time, then you need to take a step back and say, well, look, what approach will work? What approach will give us the level of protection we want? And as I said, as a company, we very much espouse the virtues of default deny.
And that default deny feels like that. How do you get by that as an attacker? That feels like the right thing to do. In other words, what your employees, your developers need to be executing on their laptops, their systems to get their work done. Why not just stick with that rather than also this bit of malware? So I have to ask, what's keeping orgs from adopting that? Because, and I know you're not saying this in the sense of there's not FUD around, LLM malware, there's more malware. It's there. I think you can give us some very good stories about what the ransomware impacts have been to hospitals, different industries. We know it's there for real. So there's got to be a reason orgs just aren't doing it. Is it lack of awareness, lack of time, lack of listening to podcasts and paying attention?
No, look, there's a bunch of different reasons. The fact is that most organizations, if they haven't had or haven't been impacted or haven't been affected or haven't had a breach or haven't had a ransomware attack, very often their attitude is going to be, well, what we're doing is working. That's an unfortunate reality. Now, it's working until it's not, and therein lies the problem. But if you haven't been impacted, if you haven't had the problem, the natural reaction as a human is to say, well, I'm doing everything right, so it should be cool. Until, as I said, it's not. So that's probably the biggest objection, or that's probably the biggest issue for most organizations is just, we're fine. We haven't had a problem. So, we're not going to change anything. But again, back to the previous point that every organization, you go to ransomware.live and just see all of the new organizations that are popping up there on a daily basis. Some of the massive organizations, the Jaguar Land Rovers of the world who, enormous ransomware attacks. Realistically, do you not think that they had tools in play that they thought was going to keep them safe? The short answer is they did, but equally those things failed to protect them in this particular instance. And the same applies to every single organization that you see that is subject to a breach or a ransomware attack. They all thought they were doing everything fine. Now, just to your point, there is no silver bullet to this. I wouldn't claim ThreatLocker is a silver bullet that will stop everything in every circumstance and every situation. Nothing is. The fact of the matter is anybody who sells a solution as being the one, everything is solved is basically selling snake oil. It's a matter of combining layers, different approaches. That's one of the things we try and do within our platform is we've got all of the control stuff, the allow listing, the ring fencing and all that kind of stuff, network control. We also have a layer of detection in there as well, because it is important to know that if something is trying to happen, that you're alerted to it rather than, an attack, even an unsuccessful attack, ongoing for a period of time. But the examples that we mentioned, I know we discussed this the other day, but it was a really interesting one where we had a customer who looked after a hospital, really big hospital, that had been breached 3 years ago. Now, the impact of the breach 3 years ago was literally business shutting down big. They encrypted 6,000 machines. Every single Windows machine within that organization was encrypted. Now, the guy actually described to me what it was like at the hospital. I mean, he said it was eerie. There was nobody going in, there was nobody going out, there was no cars in the car park. I mean, their access systems were shut down. So like cards weren't working. People literally couldn't get into the building. So yeah, basically everything they had was encrypted. Now, fast forward almost 3 years, they had another incident this Christmas. I think it was credentials for sale on the dark web, whatever it happened to be. But since the previous incident, they deployed ThreatLocker. They, implemented default deny. And instead of 6,000 machines being encrypted, they had 200 machines encrypted, which, surprise, weren't running ThreatLocker. So that shows the difference in outcome that is possible. And the really interesting thing in that case is obviously there was malware involved, but the really interesting thing in this case is what ThreatLocker blocked and stopped the attack chain basically was they tried to deploy commercial RMM tools. They tried to deploy Enable and they tried to deploy, I can't remember the other one, what the other one was, but two commercially available RMM tools that ThreatLocker stopped from running. Now, nothing else is going to stop RMM tools from running because RMM tools are not bad. They're not inherently malicious. Organizations may need to use them, organizations may not, but it's not something that your typical EDR or AV or MDR or anything like that is going to stop because it's not bad software.
Not inherently.
Can it be used maliciously? Absolutely it can. And this is a great example of it trying to be used maliciously. But again, because of default deny, it wasn't allowed to deploy. Therefore, that attack chain was broken.
And I want to use that too to sort of to highlight another angle too, in the sense of there's a lot of, I try to avoid as much as possible old AppSec cliches or push back on them. And one of them that comes to mind is attackers only need to be right once, defenders need to be right all the time. I think what you just described was more of attackers need to be right every single point of the step on their compromise. And if you have a default deny, if you have observability, if you have people paying attention to those alerts, then you may still be compromised, okay, but the impact will be lessened, and the time to identify it could be much quicker. And I think that is the more important part of that story, rather than be too defeatist and just say, oh, they just need one person to click on a link from an email and the world is over. That doesn't feel like the reality of anything. And I think what you were describing kind of highlights that in a good way.
Again, it comes back to one of the tenets of Zero Trust is to assume breach. Working the principle they're already in. Right now, they've got full domain access. They can do anything they want. Well, they could do anything they want within your environment right now. How do you stop them? How do you slow them down? How do you make their life as difficult as possible? And as I said, having things like, RMM tools or remote access tools, like, a screen connector, a team viewer. I mean, again, they're all used by threat actors for really good reasons, which is that they're not inherently bad. They're not going to get stopped by most tools. Again, can they be misused? Absolutely. But just because, I mean, going back to my ChatGPT bio, one of the things it said is he is a strong believer in that he believes in application allow listing and the radical idea that software shouldn't be able to run just because it feels like it. And that's quite simply what we're talking about, is that not allowing software to run just because it feels like it.
One of the angles here is obviously we're talking about the technical aspects of ring fencing, default deny, and we were talking about even in the article about void link, the time to develop malware, the attacker time. I'm setting this up because there's also budget cost, and that was maybe one of those things I was thinking of in the back of my mind, in that sense of what's keeping orgs from adopting more just AppSec strategies. I'm curious because I think you're more clued in this area. How has cybersecurity or cyber insurance affected or influenced orgs to be more proactive, or are they because they're the ones spending money on the ransomware payouts? If so, how is that influencing? Because I can imagine budget and money might be more of an influence than, hey, let's talk about some cool, like very 1990s almost security concepts.
Look, it depends on the organization. In some instances, budget is very much an issue. In some instances, budget, it just isn't an issue. I mean, if you've seen some of the customers or some of the people I've spoken to in terms of what they spend in cybersecurity, and like we've got 10 different tools, we've got 10 different portals we need to log into, we've got 10 different agents running on our machines, and they're all going to keep us super safe. I mean, the mind boggles in some cases, and I have seen instances like that. But again, on the flip side, there are absolutely organizations for where budget is really important and they need to get every last ounce out of their cybersecurity dollar. I mean, both are a thing. And look, you can talk to people, you can show them, average ransom payout is X. I mean, that's not going to move the needle if you don't think you're going to be hit. It's X $100,000. Well, we'll deal with it when it comes to it. I mean, if you haven't been impacted, then it's easy to dismiss it. I mean, the insurance aspect, I had a really interesting conversation with one of the large insurers in Europe at an event a couple of years ago now, actually. But they'd said to me that there was one cyber attack in France, the payout for which was more than all of the premiums taken in that country. So one attack, one breach, they paid out more than they took in for all of the premiums in that country. And what that means for your average organization is it's just going to be harder to get coverage. In a lot of cases, they're just not going to give you coverage. I mean, I remember filling in cybersecurity insurance forms for, people 10 years ago, and it was 5 questions. It was, do you have antivirus? Tick, yes. Do you have a backup? Tick, yes. Do you keep your machines up to date? Tick, yes. And that was basically it. Now, look at the same form today, and I suspect it's not going to be 5 questions. It's probably going to be more like 500 questions. And they do that for a very good reason, which is they want to know that you're taking all the steps that you can. So very often it isn't just a question of cost, because yes, if you don't have all of these best practices in place, it's probably going to cost you more. But there is also you're just not going to get coverage if you don't, or if you can't answer all the questions that they want you to answer in the affirmative.
Now, part of that too, and I want to tie back in maybe do our threat models change? Because threat actors can start using LLMs to write their malware. And this angle is more of just what you've seen. Are different industries now being targeted? And the reason I bring this up is my hypothesis being that random individuals can just, rather than go target the industries where the big malware attackers are getting the money, and they'll go out someplace new and different. And so that aspect of what you were seeing of we haven't been attacked yet, maybe that time is narrowing. I don't know. Help me think this through. Is that even something that's that should be included as part of that equation?
Potentially, but equally, generally speaking, organizations are not selected to be attacked. They're, it's not that, unless you're really unlucky, it's not that they're after you specifically. Very often, as I said, it's things like, access being bought on the dark web, somebody's had a keylogger running on their machine for X amount of time, and all of a sudden they've got access to whatever on your domain. They're not specifically going after you or your organization. You're not that special, really. Now, there are some exceptions to that, which is, hacktivists are probably going after you. In some cases, with bigger organizations, nation states might be going after your organization specifically, but in 99% of cases, they're not after you specifically. They're just after where they can get paid.
Yeah, and I think that's where just a long sighs, I take that in, because it is kind of funny that idea you're not that special. It's just opportunistic. People are scanning, and if you did mess up, that is maybe attackers only need you to mess up once to get their attention, and then from there everything falls out about how mature were you on your defenses and observation, etc. If we kind of bring back and trying to come back full circle with the conversation, it's unavoidable to talk about LLMs. LLMs for defender side. Let me switch that. Especially for smaller orgs. Is there anyone that you've seen that's we need that LLM to either give us the list of what that default denial, what is the software we're using? Has LLMs for defenders been saving them time yet? Or what does that area look like?
Potentially, yes. I mean, again, they are very powerful tools. They are very useful tools. And if you know what you want to ask, if you know what you're trying to achieve, then, asking an LLM for advice on it is not necessarily a bad thing. Now, you could argue that, and based on my own experience of working with these things, is that they are sometimes wrong. Before we started, I asked for a 3-word description, as we're going to get to later, and one of the descriptions it gave me had 4 words. Now, that's a very basic example, but it is an example of where these things get things wrong. So, I mean, I absolutely wouldn't be putting all my faith and trust in the advice that anything gives me. Just purely because of that, which is it's not going to always give you the best advice. It's not going to. Now, if you keep digging and keep digging and keep digging, eventually you may come around to the correct answer. But again, just based on the fact that they do get things wrong. And it's one of the reasons why, the cybersecurity industry as a whole, much like many industries, everybody's been flocking towards AI. They want to say they're infused by AI or powered by AI, or, AI does this for us and AI does that for it. But the difficulty is, if AI is making decisions on your behalf, much like the 4 words instead of 3 words that ChatGPT gave me a few minutes ago, it's going to get some decisions wrong. And if anything, it's going to get them wrong with confidence. And that's a bigger problem, is the fact that, yes, I mean, realistically, everybody gets things wrong from time to time. But if you get something wrong with absolute confidence, then that can be game-changing and ultimately business-destroying.
That's how you get a promotion. But seriously, as you talk through there, like the points you're saying resonate around this. But if we take a look from a business point of view, a lot of these startups we see that are like doing the AI paintbrush, it's to either get more customers or get more revenue. Whereas if we go back to the top of the discussion when we're talking about these viruses being written by AI, the malicious folks aren't out there usually trying to get more market share or investment, or what they get a job they're trying to get done. So they're actively trying to figure out how to use this tool in the best way possible. I guess where I'm going with this is like it's one of the problems I think we've probably talked about on here before is like, how do we get, like my employees, how do we get any sort of developers quickly to get up to speed on these things and use them in that best way possible? What do you see as the balance between that versus just grabbing something that's been marketed to you? Does that make sense where I'm talking through? Like, so it's one thing to say, oh, AI, and I get you with the math thing. Like I was excited last week because it got an addition correct. But how do we take like any of us who are using this for a day-to-day job or want to use this and actually get somewhere with that tool?
I think with controls is probably the first place to start, because I think probably the most dangerous, and I think there have been documented cases of this in the media recently about people putting information into free AI tools that they probably shouldn't have. So I think with controls is probably a really good place to start. I mean, obviously you need to have procedures in place. You need to have training in place for staff as well. As in, this is what you can do, this is what you can't do. And if we find out you're doing what you can't do or you shouldn't be doing, then there's going to be consequences. That kind of thing is pretty much the low-hanging fruit. But yeah, I mean, it's as I said, they are tremendously useful. They are tremendously helpful tools. If you want to, find information. I mean, I did a thing, actually, it was at RSAC last year with I think it was the CISO of Anthropic, a panel, and incredibly clever guy, incredibly interesting talking to him. But he was saying at that point that they had, I think at that stage, 40% of their development was done by AI. So 40% of their code was written by AI. And he expected by now, basically by this year, it will be 90%. Now that's both incredible and also quite scary, thinking that 90% of a code of a thing, our company like Anthropic is written by AI. Now, obviously, they've got controls built in. They've got, reviews being done by human beings and so on. But it's still both amazing and, quite frankly, terrifying that a company like that could be doing pretty much all of the development using these tools.
That aspect too brings to my mind a difference between I'm the attacker just using the LLM to craft some malware, because I don't necessarily care about the resiliency, the uptime of my malware. I do want it to work and be, go after maybe those 6,000, if it can hit all those 6,000 endpoints that you described, that's awesome. I don't want to be stuck on one and then have some silly bug where it comes back. But that feels like, I guess I can be a bit sloppier with my malware. Because people don't have the strong detections. Whereas if I'm on the defender side, or let me just say, if I'm building SaaS, building an API, I need to understand what's going on. And that to me is like, maybe there's a lot of code being written, but do we understand the architecture? Are they influencing the architecture of how that code is being written? And so when I'm listening to like you and John have that discussion, my mind is going less to the like lines of code and more about, do we just understand what's going on? Because I think that comes back to some of your points, Rob, just saying in the sense of we perhaps know as an industry what are good designs, good defenses, but we lose track of them. There are, who knows, a long list probably of reasons that those don't get adopted. So but I don't really have a question there, but I wanted to seed that conversation. Yeah, help me out, John.
Hang on a second on that one. It's actually a really fundamentally core thing you just said. And maybe that's part of the problem we have with the LLM arguments. You're saying like, we don't know what's going on in there. If we knew what was going on in our software, would we have all the bugs we have? So.
Yeah, it's a very good point. I mean, there are, I suppose, intricities or eccentricities. I don't know which one it is, but like there's little things that, for example, we've got lines of code in our service and our driver that have been there for 3, 4, 5 years, and they were put there for a very specific reason, which was that we came across this issue, whatever it happened to be, and we worked around it. We know what this is, and we there's knowledge there that most of these tools just won't have. I mean, if I went on to whatever tool it happens to be and said, write me a threat locker, I'm sure it would have a fairly good stab at it, but I'm also sure it would very much fall on its face the first time it actually ran into a computer that it ran on, because there's so many of those little things that have been found, discovered, figured out, worked around or fixed over time that it's not going to be, wouldn't even say it's not going to be perfect. It probably wouldn't even run in most instances, in most cases. So it's not a one-stop, just do me or make me a this thing. It is, in reality, it's more about, and in most cases, it's probably going to be, I've got this problem, can you fix this problem for me? And they're incredibly useful for that. They're really, really handy for that, because you can run into, no matter how good a developer is, they can run into brick walls with something and they say, I just can't figure this out. And there may be circumstances, again, perfectly legitimate ones, where they go and bounce it off. I mean, in the old days, there was a guy that I used to work with in my pre-threat locker days. And when we were troubleshooting or diagnosing issues, massive part of the value or a massive part of the interaction was basically just bouncing ideas off each other. This is what's happening, and he'd say, well, you have to look at that, and it's just ideas back and forth. Now, in a lot of cases, you can actually achieve the same thing with an LLM now. You don't need another human being that you need to bounce ideas back and forth off. So there, as I said, there is absolutely value, or there's absolutely usefulness from that perspective, as a idea bouncer offer, if that makes sense.
And it's a long domain name, but it makes sense.
He probably knows who he is. He actually works for Threat Locker now, funnily enough, but I'm not going to tell him that I mentioned him here, because he will definitely know who he is.
Well, I think part of that also sounds like you're describing that there's an experience and or maintenance aspect of the code base that you're describing, because I'll point out it might be easy to say, a default deny, here's a list of apps that can run. If it's not on the list, don't run. But there's probably some experience there in the sense of it needs to have a low CPU usage. Let's be smart about memory usage. Let's also have alerts that are smart. Like we can dedupe alerts so we don't generate 100,000 events that was actually just one, a loop around one thing trying to be installed, because that's not helping the humans trying to consume this. No, and I think,
that's what I hear you describing. Yeah, they're absolutely going to drown in noise. I mean, again, with a lot of tools, alert fatigue is a real problem. And if you're getting, it's like the boy who cried wolf thing, which is, if you're just hearing wolf, wolf, wolf everywhere, and you're, chasing all of these alerts, that none of which are actually anything important, when something really important comes through, you're going to be less inclined to either check it out, or you're going to be too slow to actually get to it. And again, the response time is critical. If your approach is to detect and respond, I mean, the first thing is you need to detect everything, which, as we've discussed, is probably difficult, but you need to respond pretty quickly as well. Like, it's no good sending an alert up to a SOC and it takes somebody 3 or 4 hours to get to it, because it's probably too late at that stage. But yeah, it's interesting.
It is. And as you've been alluding to from the very beginning, drown in noise, for example, is 3 words. And I would kind of jokingly, that's a good way to describe some bad practices within AppSec. But rather than have an LLM give us 4 words, Rob, I'd love to hear, how would you describe AppSec in 3 words?
Okay, can I cheat? I was going to do 1, but I'm actually going to cheat and do 2.
Cheat. Okay. As long as
I'm sorry, because I want to give kudos to David, who actually gave me this one, and I actually really like it, which is stop attacks early. But the other one was going to be default deny always, which I kind of did previously. So we'll go with stop attacks early.
I think that they're both 3 words. They both sound pretty legit as the positive way to approach AppSec to me. So it gets a thumbs up from my side. Thank you. Rob, one last question. Anything that's coming? We've been mentioning RSAC conference. Anything you want to call attention to from some blog posts, or maybe even some presentations that you'll be giving in over the next couple months?
Well, we are going to be at RSAC. I think I'm actually going to be speaking at RSAC. So that's I'm looking forward to that very much, and meeting lots of people, lots of customers. Great thing about RSAC year on year is every time we go, there's more customers there, which is phenomenal. And it's just great to have conversations, feedback, everything else with them. I will mention we have our own event, which, to be perfectly honest, is 1,000,000 times better than RSAC. You think RSAC is good? This is way better. It's March 6th to 8th, I believe. It's here in Orlando, in Florida, which hopefully by that time will not be as cold as Orlando and Florida is right now. But it's a phenomenal event. We had 1,500 people last year at it. It's very much hands-on. We've got hacking sessions. We've got, I think Jacoby is giving one of the sessions. I think Linus Tech Tips is speaking at it. So it's both a nerd fest and also not a nerd fest. There's a lot of nerd stuff there. As I said, hacking with this thing and how to stop this attack or that attack. So it's really informative, but there are also some really good, interesting speakers. As I said, the likes of Linus Tech Tips, etc. will be there and speaking. So yeah, zerotrustworld.zdw.com. Check it out, register. If you want a free pass, ask me really nicely and I can organize one for you.
That's awesome. Well, thank you very much, Rob, for nerding out with us today, especially given it's a hot topic, but you got us through it from your cold Florida today. Thank you.
Thank you.
To learn more about ThreatLocker, visit securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker or go check out the ZTW links that Rob mentioned earlier. We're going to take a quick break now and check out the news of the week. Ever feel like your network infrastructure is stuck in the past? Meet Meter, the company reimagining what it means to get and stay online. Meter delivers full-stack networking, wired, wireless, and cellular, all in one seamless, scalable, and secure solution. From hardware design and firmware to software deployment and support, Meter streamlines every part of your network while giving you all the control and transparency you need. Whether you're managing a branch office, retail stores, or a massive data center, Meter gives you performance, reliability, and the visibility you need to stay in control. Thanks to Meter for sponsoring. Go to securityweekly.com/meter to book a demo now. That's securityweekly.com/meter, METER. Welcome back to Application Security Weekly. We just talked with Rob Allen about LLMs creeping into the future of malware creation and the proactive default deny and a few other controls that can keep that future secure, or which sounds like secure malware creation. I guess I mostly mean secure from malware. I'll have to figure out how to make sure that's clear. But one of your non-clear hosts is here, Mike Shima. I'm also here with someone a little bit more clear on all things AppSec and otherwise, John Kinsella.
I don't know if I'd go that far, but okay.
Well, you can think about it because we've got to remind our listeners about most security conferences talk about threats. Zero Trust World lets you attack them. And once again, I think it's talking about attacking threats, not other security conferences. From March 4th to 6th in Orlando, Florida, this hands-on cybersecurity event features live hacking labs while you'll break real environments, think like an adversary, and learn how attacks really work. It can be fun. You'll also get expert sessions, real-world case studies, CPE credits, and networking with top practitioners. And the Security Weekly team will be there too. Sadly, I won't, but we've got a big family. Go say hi to them. Register today at securityweekly.com/ZTW. That's a Z for my Canadian friends out there. John, you're not Canadian, but you're still my friend. And another friend of the show is Daniel Stenberg, who's been writing. I wanted to close the loop. We talked last week about Curl ending their bug bounty program. They've got a new blog post about that. And really, the one thing I guess I just wanted to pull out about that is that since April 2019, so roughly 6 years of their bounty program, they had 87 confirmed vulns and paid out about $100,000, which honestly is impressive, and that was they're celebrating the effectiveness that they got out of the bounty program, but also seems like so wonderfully low because we've also in the past in 2025, I know in 2024, we've covered a couple articles about Apple or Google or Android saying, we just spent, $1 million, $2 million, $10 million on bug bounties, which again, I'm not against bug bounty programs. It's still good to engage, reward researchers, but it's one of those things where you don't really want the high score necessarily. Yeah. You want the secure design that's preventing these really impactful things. So I did want to close the loop there. Not sure if you've got anything else you want to add to that. Otherwise, we've got some more news from this week.
It was, me, going looking for pretty pictures. There's a graph down in there which shows the number of submissions that he's been having or that Curl's been having versus the average open source package. And basically, the point he's trying to make is because they were paying money that they're getting 4x right now the number of submissions. So yeah, I get it. I think it's going to be, so it's interesting also, he doesn't want to charge people for submissions, which is what some other open source packages try, because they're trying to figure out if we can make it more expensive for you to send something to us for us to review, then maybe you'll actually do your homework first. There has to be some sort of balance here, right? Because it's not everyone's going to have this ability to stop doing submissions. It'd be fun maybe to grab one of the HackerOne guys, have them come back on here and sort of talk through what they're thinking about.
That's true. Yeah, we'll have to reach out and we'll have to get Ben back on too to talk about what he's seen in this world. But you set up a wonderful segue. Thank you once again, John, because speaking of open source projects, OpenSSL, which coincidentally we were picking on a little bit last week in terms of their engineering design, API design, and more pointing out how do you get adoption and engagement for your project. And you do so by having an API that developers appreciate, developers can use and understand, that doesn't make things super complex. The other aspect, of course, is the application security side. You don't want vulns. And now this list of a dozen vulns, I don't think were necessarily the sky is falling. It's obviously not at Heartbleed type of level. Everybody had to go and react to it. But there were a lot of people updating their OpenSSL and all their OpenSSL derived packages over the weekend. But what was interesting about this was all these dozen items were identified by AI to some degree, not clear how much was it pure AI versus AI plus a human, LLMs, I should be saying. This is from Isle. So here's some more free marketing for yet another security focused LLM company out there. There are quite many. But if we're talking about the reason I brought this up is the theme this week is to talk about LLMs as security flaw finders. Because on the one hand, we've got Curl who's saying we're getting too much noise, drowned in noise, as we were joking about last segment with Rob. But here's some here's a dozen vulnerabilities. I think one was high, one was moderate, that were legitimate. These are bugs that need to be fixed. So I guess the best thing I can say, it was interesting, and I think it really caught my eye because OpenSSL is such a scrutinized set of code that it's pretty impressive that the vulnerabilities can still be found, at least this type of density of vulns.
I missed the ISLE part of this. I'd love to know more. Like, why, right? So what are they doing? As you said, this is so scrutinized. Backwards, forwards, multiple on, human-based code reviews, all sorts of stuff. Yeah, I got the link, thanks. But like all this stuff going on, how did they just suddenly find vulns that others haven't? And I'm not trying to say that. It sounds conspiratorial. I don't want to go that way. But
No.
I'd be really interested to see what do they have. What is their model doing different, or how are they looking at the application in a way that others aren't?
Yeah, and that's the part that appealed to me about this. That's why I wanted to hit this, and that's one of the things that we'll talk on air about the people we want to talk to. We should reach out and get somebody from ISLE to talk to us, because one of the other aspects that I focus on or am curious about is also the time spent, because we covered the Google Project Zero article that was talking about here's how it took humans writing up some framework to analyze a code base, and then the 3 to 4 weeks to set up their tooling, debugging, then led to about 2 days of analysis to go find some pretty consequential bugs. This would be loved to, from this ISLE and OpenSSL scenario, would love to know, as you said, what they did different, but how much time did they spend? And that's also why I pulled in another article. This is CVE 2025-60021. It's a command injection in the Apache BRPC heap profiler, which probably just lost everybody's attention. I almost fell asleep reading that title because it's very boring. I think it's one of those things that who's using this? It's a BPRC, is a C++ based code base. I don't think it's like it's out there, or it represents a huge attack surface across the internet, but I don't want to take away from it. And this is Simcha Kosman who wrote the article. What they highlighted was not so much the specific vuln, but CyberArk has this Vulnhala project. And they're using CodeQL plus an LLM to basically say, hey, we're going to point our CodeQL at a bunch of C and C++ code. It's going to bring back some false positives, but we're going to have an LLM say, get rid of the false positives for me. In other words, save me some time as the human. And so that to me was kind of that aspect of, it's not purely finding vulns because it's an LLM. It's using tools that exist. I don't know how ISLE did it, but that was the part that started to appeal to me. And so it claims in just 2 days of work and a budget of under $80, they identified, I think, half a dozen CVEs. And the CVEs, one was dated back to February, so I don't know, and the rest were around August, so I don't know if the list is quite accurate or complete. Would love to get some more details there. But they are pretty straightforward. That feels like CodeQL itself should have just found them. But I guess burying the lead is that the LLM helped the researcher be more efficient. And I think there is, in the last segment, you were also talking, John, just about LLMs writing code or being more efficient. I'm perhaps putting words in your mouth a little bit there, but is that a use case that you've seen yourself as well, or how have you seen LLMs helping you with the code or security analysis of code?
Depends, right? That's a story I should have brought in here. As I'm sort of going through here, I was looking through the article trying to figure out what LLM they were using. They don't mention that, but what they do talk about is using the LLM to triage. So they're doing that combination of human robot work, right? At last half, we had that comment of bouncing the ideas off the LLM to use it to allow the human to sort of brainstorm and think of different ways to attack or different ways to protect. And this is sort of, you can do the same thing on this side of it too. I think we were talking about protect before, but here for attack, it's like, yeah, it might not have the creativity itself, but it's I'll say larger. I'll say knowledge for now, but it's the ability to say like, okay, well, we started here and we're going to go into this. There's another article too, right? Into this of how do we take that idea we started with and that didn't work, that attack didn't work, but maybe try something different. So maybe that's what they're doing and having it sort of refined CodeQL rules.
Yeah, and I think it was as they were describing it was they were running the CodeQL rules, the vanilla CodeQL rules, if you will, and then having the LLM try to figure out, is this buffer length actually where is it set within the code? So it's trying to get the LLM to understand the context of the code base itself. And it does talk about some of the trade-offs between CodeQL itself just struggling with large code bases or taking a long time to run, as well as humans taking a long time to analyze. And to throw a couple to try to put some numbers behind this. It looks, they have a table, and there's another article that I linked to talking about their Vulnerabilities, and the table shows about 2,500 issues found by CodeQL. And then the author is saying, if reviewed manually, maybe it takes about 3 minutes per issue to look at. And I won't quibble with the number, because even if we say 3 minutes for 2,500 issues, that's a long day. Of time just to look at code. Your brain's going to get tired. And so what they were pointing out is that LLMs can help with that. You just give an LLM, run it with some time, feed it some dollars, and then you can come back and say, what do you think, LLM, I should pay attention to? Because it looked at the context of what CodeQL built in the sense of the code base to say, semantically, LLMs don't understand necessarily all the semantic tokens of code. They can parse it, but I think that it gets a little bit better to figure out to say, this is not this was a comment, so we could ignore this, or this is what that buffer length was intended to be. And yes, it is going to read one past that buffer, therefore you have a vuln. So it's interesting. It's one of those things. It goes into that. Let's check this out 6 months later. That appreciate that you've brought up. I think the other thing for me is I also just think of this as, why not use the LLM to do what you just mentioned at the very end there, to refine the CodeQL? Can we be a little bit smarter about the regex or the CodeQL query so it can be more accurate rather than produce false positives in the first place? And that's my gut reaction when reading things like this, because I want to make the tools better rather than just say, here's a lot of noise and we're going to drown slightly less by using another noisy tool to help us with this noise. It just doesn't feel good.
You're asking about patterns. One of my favorite patterns, if I'm using it for coding, excuse me, is after I sort of go through and sort of figure out a design spec with the robot, to say like, hey, ask me 5 questions that I haven't thought about here yet. And it'll just sort of dream up 5 questions, and like very frequently it'll make me go have that aha moment of like, oh, I never even thought about that. And it's the same thing here, right? It's like I don't think it necessarily has to be a human. Same thing as pair coding or like just brainstorming at a whiteboard. Once you get outside your head, you get some sort of different ideas, and I think that the robot can really help with that. Yeah.
So here, I've got maybe just one question for you. I'm going to segue into another article, John. This is another CVE title, CVE 2025-40551. Again, nobody cares about CVE numbers, at least I can't keep them memorized. But the title is Another SolarWinds Web Help Desk Deserialization Issue. Mm-hmm. And this is from Horizon3.ai. So we've got a lot of these AI security companies giving their write-ups, doing some insight on can they find it, etc. Obviously, just having SolarWinds in the title makes it like, oh, let's talk about SolarWinds. Mm-hmm. The vulnerability here is honestly so boring. There's an allow list bypass that basically, if you put the word Ajax in your URL, it has a really weak validation mechanism where it looks to see, are you looking for the Ajax endpoint? Oh, you are. I'll let you through. And you could just put the word Ajax into URL parameter value and bypass it that way. So in other words, just a really bad use of regex. And that was another thing we talked about last week. Anchor your regular expressions or be smarter about them. But I'm going to pause there because it's not so much about what the honestly, the 90s style vulnerabilities that were in this particular app, but more of, because it's 90s style, could an LLM, or would you use an LLM? Could you rely on an LLM to migrate your code to a more modern framework, or at least go fix those vulns quickly? And one of the things I haven't seen is a lot of the companies, the CyberArk, the Horizon 3, the Atlas, they're showing, here's how we found it. Even, Project Zero, also, here's how we found it. Nobody is showing off, here is the pull request we submitted that was written by our AI. And that, I think, is where I'm going to be more convinced about the AI coding benefits to see that. Or at least I want, maybe not convince is the best word, but I want to see that as more of a proof of concept to say, it's really easy just to give developers more work, go fix this bug. It's much more friendly to say, here's the solid PR that we think fixes this bug effectively. So I don't know, how does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I think it's becoming more and more common. I think it's just, it's not on our newsfeed radar. I know at least 2 startups that are working on that. There's probably 10 or 20.
Easily.
But if you look at both OpenAI and Claude have gotten decently better in the last 6 months. I think when I was first playing with Claude for a security review was last summer. I think I told you off air, like whatever project it was, like the security review report was like 20 and 30 pages of just like sort of slop. So then it couldn't really give me a suggestion how to fix. But when I've done that more recently, and these are hobby projects, not stuff I do at work, but like that's sort of, it's getting better at going like, oh yeah, this is the problem. I think I asked someone recently, I think it was on air here about a month ago, of like, how do you, there's, if you think about the sort of what you're saying in a way, these things train off of, just what's out there on the internet. So unless we've got code which says, or unless we have a website out there somewhere that says, here's how you fix X, or what I was thinking of is here how you move from C++ to Rust. How it does that, it's going to have to take a stab in the dark, right? And I think the response we got from whoever I was talking to, I'm pretty sure it was on here, was, oh, well, no, you get it to tell you, summarize what it's trying to do, and then re-implement that in a different language. And once you start doing that type of thing, there's a little bit of hand-waving going on, and you're asking it to kind of accurately summarize, and then B, kind of accurately re-implement that in another language. We're starting to get a little sort of sketchy, I think, for another at least 6 months. But yeah, it's out there. It'd be fun to have a practitioner who's doing this. Not so much we'll always talk to the vendors, but like, let's find a practitioner who's doing this day in, day out their job, and see what they're doing. That could be fun.
And one of the things that they could be doing is, we covered a couple weeks ago the trail of bits they open source their skills. And one of those skills of that set was, look at this, analyze this code base, build your own very granular analysis, and then go basically find some vulns. And then after it finds vulns, it'll say, hey, I found this list of 12. I wrote it this markdown file in this document directory. And then it will prompt you, the human, and say, shall I fix this? And so that is, there is an evolution there of how these skills and LLM-based tools are doing this. And I think what I'm really curious about is pretty much what you said more succinctly, perhaps. This is why we keep going over a 30-minute timeline, is what are the practitioners doing? But speaking of LLMs writing code, and you're talking about, you mentioned Claude. Who knows what the name of this bot is today? But here's an article. I pulled one from Sneak. I linked to also a 404 Media article about Claudebot, or OpenClaw, as it is. At least that's his name today. Maybe it'll get renamed this week. But it's basically, as Sneak article titles it, your Claudebot AI assistant has shell access and one prompt injection away from disaster. And then And 404 Media also says Silicon Valley's favorite new AI agent has serious security flaws. And I pulled this in because I think we should talk about it. It also was like, how distinguishable is this from malware, in the sense of not that it was written with malicious intent, but it could basically do what malware does. And that was, I thought, was a good tie-in with our discussion with Rob Allen last segment. So John, let me ask you, how much control have you given OpenClaw to your laptop?
So this was not planned, dear listener, but I spent most of the weekend working with Claudebot. I didn't realize that Mike had this article in here. Yeah. So yeah, man, there's so much hype around this thing. I think it got 125,000 likes on GitHub in 3 days or something when it first launched. Just crazy balls. The idea is really interesting. Sort of take a step back, what this thing is, and why it sort of potentially interested me, is it's a local chatbot which you would run on a system that you have, and you give it shell access. That's part of the idea. And then you plug it into OpenAI or Anthropic or all sorts of different things, and you're basically able to have your own custom bot that does what you want in the way that you want, right? So you can connect it to either iMessage or WhatsApp or Telegram, or pick your poison, Discord, and you talk to it through that interface. So that's where we start talking about prompts. If you plug this thing into Discord and you don't have it, you're able to allow list it. They have all the controls in there you need. But if you don't allow list it or set it to only do allow listing, someone else can come in and just like prompt your thing away. One of the vulnerabilities which came out last week was its WebSocket by default doesn't have authentication on it. So if you leave this thing sitting on the internet, you're gonna have a problem. If you look at the docs, either the hardening guides out on Reddit or like actually what's in their readmes now, they say, yeah, don't run this on your personal machine. Don't give it access to. Well, there is a plugin to access 1Password. Don't give it access to your 1Password. If you're using it with any of these things I talked about, Claude or 11 Labs or anyone else, you're able to, most of these tools now, because they're used to the agentic thing, you're able to go in and specify what's the maximum credits you want this thing to use per day or per week or per month. I just downgraded Claude because I wasn't using it that much. I was in the $100 a month plan, went down to 20, and this thing blew through that in about 15 or 20 minutes. So, and it's funny, while I was exploring around this morning looking, so it's, once you get the thing going, there's also a Claw Hub, which is sort of the hub for being able to add skills to your thing. And I'm like, oh, look, someone's added a security research skill. And I went and looked, and that user had like 2 other skills in there as well. And part of the skill was, I don't know if this is still on there, I'm pretty sure this is malicious. You have to download OpenClaw core, they claim, and that's at some URL somewhere else. And you go and you look at it, and it's a binary either for Windows or a Mac. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure this has a certain smell that I don't want to install on my machine. But there's the potential to do the absolute worst things out there. I had a really great quote. Let me track it down real quick that someone mentioned. So one of the ways to install this is with a curl bash pipe, right? The standard evil thing, which we try to avoid, especially with sudo. And the quote was, curl bash pipe is a horrible thing, but it isn't the dumbest thing you're doing today if you're installing OpenClaw. So there's this potential there, right? And this is sort of this thing, we're right on the edge of what sort of a new technology, once again, with AppSec and security in general, IT security. Love the idea of like, I could install this on my main machine and it would have access to my emails, to my, all my notes, and if they're in OpenNote or in Obsidian or what have you. It could plug into all the things I have, like my home assistants, all sorts of different things, and be like, ooh, just custom for me. But if you do that, and you miss, we were talking about weakest link, that's suddenly everything you have, all your preciouses, they're going to be siphoned right out of your world out into the internet. And yeah, that's not good.
It's not good. And it feels like a lot of this is our opportunity to recreate AppSec from first principles in 2026, because I see this and I look at it like, oh, you can't even just say run this in a container, because a lot of its, purported benefit, a lot of the what people have been glomming onto is that, oh, it can interact with all these different APIs, it can send email, interact with your calendar. And it doesn't matter if it's running in a container or not. The container aspect is just don't rm-rf my laptop. Yeah. So that's where my mind goes to, oh, how much of the granular authorization can we do? Can we, or do we have to, or must we put onto all these APIs, so that now rather than send and receive email, you have these read email to and from only, or read subject lines, or suddenly these things that are 50 different, levels of authorization you could define for your SaaS. But I think nobody's going to go through and point by point figure out, oh, I need this one, but not this other one, and this authorization, not this other one. They're just going to go that default star. And so I can imagine we should have better controls on this, but I don't know in practicality that it's really going to happen. So
it will.
Yeah.
The joke I was going to make on LinkedIn this morning was, who's already started working on a security startup just for OpenClaw? Because it's out there somewhere. The potential is a ton. I mean, and this is, sorry, I'm going to go down to path which anyone playing in this space is going to start doing. Like, you start hyping even what you're doing yourself, and but it's not so much that I'm hyping what I'm doing. It's to give an example of the type of stuff this thing can do. I'm back to working on my private pilot's license, and I'm like, oh, maybe I can get it to the goal where I want to get here is I want to be able to do quiz me when I'm driving to work. So just CarPlay audio and just, have a chat with the bot and be able to do that. But within about half an hour this morning, I'm like, hey, I'm working on my private pilot's license. I've got, a few hours in the plane. I'd love you to create download a set of questions and create a quiz so we can sort of learn how to do this. And 5-10 minutes later, 15-20 minutes later, it started slow. It had that database bank. It had set up a way to track which questions I'd gotten right, gotten wrong. And then to start asking questions when I got them wrong, or to explain to me why the mistake in it. So I could probably go find an app like that, but not in a chatbot style, and definitely not with the voice. So there's a ton of potential there, but you just got to be really careful how you use it. But I think it'll eventually get tightened down.
That's and it is one of those things that the 6 months later list. This is we'll see what it looks like to get tightened down, because to be fair, the project maintainer has been very receptive and reactive to all of the security feedback that he's been receiving, both pointing out, have you even thought about this, as well as, hey, here's something to fix, here's something to improve. So that is the constructive way to approach a project like this. We'll cross our fingers and see what happens.
Wait, I'm not
John,
done.
Well, I was going to say, it's now we got to go through our checklist as we got to bring this into a landing to riff off what you were just talking about. Any final notes for our passengers as we come into the end of this segment?
Fastened until we're securely on the ground.
Appreciate it. We'll come up with some more AppSec. What if AppSec did air flight safety? Well, we can always have fun with that. Thanks everybody for joining us. Thank you, John, once again for walking through the news with me. Please, everyone, do remember to subscribe. Check out the show notes. We've got some comments and links to all the articles that we covered. And please share us on the socials. And speaking of new projects, check out Undertaken by Celerect LA Dreams. Add some synthwave to your life. We'll see you next time on Application Security Weekly.